Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to continue with our focus on the Captain America franchise, and I'm gonna do that with this next movie, Captain America Civil War. Now, interestingly enough, this is the sequel to The Winter Soldier, but I also have to mention that this specific movie, Civil War, is almost like a light Avengers movie. Because, as you can see in this picture, nearly all of them are in this. And so, I have to talk about a lot of characters here. Because, as you can see on this picture, they form two sides to one problem that may or may not be larger than themselves. Okay. So, I'm gonna start with giving you the disclaimer, of course. On occasion, I might flub a word. I may have a weird pause because I have to look something up on my screen. The screen is also gonna get brighter, and I'm gonna get brighter because of it. Also, I might swear, I might not swear. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. Okay. I have a lot to get through. So let's start with talking about this movie. Also, I have to mention again, like I did in The Winter Soldier, a lot of time has already happened before, so I'm gonna refer to other things that have happened in the MCU. Okay. So let's start. So first off, we get in this movie a prologue, which takes us back to 1991, where the brainwashed super soldier, the Winter Soldier, that we now know as Bucky Barnes, is dispatched from a base of Hydra in Siberia, where he has to go and intercept a car that is loaded with the super soldier serum that was used to give him his powers. And I'm gonna cut back to to the Winter Soldier movie for a moment, because something I think I didn't explain enough is that you're dealing with these two guys, Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes, who both have been injected with a serum that gives them super strength. And I do think I've given enough to say about that happened for Steve, but Bucky has it too. So, also, interestingly enough, I've started talking about this. I've started talking about all of this because I saw the fourth movie of the Captain America franchise just recently, Brave New World. I'll show you the poster again. I have to tell you, I really do like this poster because you see a lot. Initially, a lot is given away already, that being the cast of this movie, but you're gonna know that when I tell you about it in the following video, probably, or the video after that, because as I've said in the the Winter Soldier movie episode, that there is a TV series that falls between those two. And also the reason why I'm also saying this is that not too long from now, actually, the Thunderbolts movie is already out, and you can go see them in the cinema or in the theater, which is the same thing, but I'm saying it either way. So that gets brought up a lot too, the super soldier strength serum, because it's a through line through all of this content when it comes to Captain America, and because it's all part of the MCU, it's all part of a larger story. And so that also happens in Civil War. And so this is why Bucky is dispatched after a case of super soldier serum, where he in 1991 has intercepted someone that was fleeing from this Hydra base in Siberia. And now we cut to the present day in the MCU, about a year after the Avengers have defeated Ultron in the nation of Sokovia. Sokovia being the place where Wanda Maximoff and her brother were from. And speaking of Wanda, she, Natasha, Steve, and Sam Wilson are in Lagos looking for Brock Rumlow, who has survived his wounds from having had a building fall on him, basically. And he now goes around as a mercenary and a mercenary leader named Crossbones. I'm gonna show his picture here again so you can see it properly. Played by Frank Grillo, who at this point also has a lucrative career as an actor. And so the four of them are in Lagos in Africa, and they're pursuing Rumlow, aka Crossbones, as he is stealing a biological weapon from a lab. And so we get a couple of interesting fight and action scenes in Lagos, and we see how each of them works on their own. You have Sam, who now has an updated wing pack, as he has had some technological help from Tony Stark, probably. I'm gonna show these people again, by the way. So you have Sam Wilson right here, and you have Wanda Maximoff, played by Elizabeth Olsen in this movie, and other movies too. You also have Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson in this movie, and of course Mr. Steve Rogers himself, played by Chris Evans. So they are all in Lagos. They're trying to stop Rumlow from getting that biological weapon, and it works, but at the cost of, unfortunately, a lot of people. Because as Steve is fighting with Rumlow, Rumlow decides that if I'm going out, I'm taking you with me. And so he attempts to kill Steve by unleashing an explosion to ammunition that he's holding on to on his person. But luckily, Wanda, who has chaos magic, is close by, and she tries to divert it away, but it is so much for her that she lifts it into the sky. But unfortunately, the explosion is so much to her that there is an explosion, and unfortunately it hits a lot in a building close by, and unfortunately a lot of people are killed. And that includes people from the nation of Wakanda, which is an in-world location from the comic books of Marvel that they're putting for the first time in the movies, in this movie specifically. And we get told that in the movie by the leader of that country, by King T'Chaka. And so we cut to the Avengers compound where Wanda is seeing all of that being mentioned on the news in her room. And she and Steve have this brief moment of who's at fault here, who's to blame, and they get a little visit from their friend Vision, who you might know from the Age of Ultron movie, who, by the way, is also in this picture I got here. He's the guy with the glowing ember on his forehead. He's played by Paul Bettany. And actually, that golden ember on his head is actually an Infinity Stone that we learn about in Age of Ultron. And Vision says, Tony is here and he has a guest, a guy named Thaddeus Ross, who is the Secretary of State. And for your Marvel heads over there, that is the guy featured prominently in this latest movie of Brave New World, played in that movie by Harrison Ford, who takes over for the actor playing Thaddeus Ross in this movie, William Hurt, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. And so they all meet with him, with the secretary, and he informs the Avengers at the compound that the UN, the United Nations, is about to pass a very long, well, what would you call it? Like a political playbook, basically, called the Sokovia Accords, which will be like a contract for the superheroes, for the Avengers, to be overseen by the United Nations and are directed by the United Nations to go where they are needed according to the UN. And so the whole team is divided over this. Those are all these people right here, excluding a couple of people. These four, for instance, this whole bottom row here, including this lady, too, and this one too. So actually, it's half that even. Anyway, so everyone is there, including, I haven't talked about this guy yet. This is Colonel Rhodes, James Rhodes, who was played by Terrence Howard in the first Iron Man movie, but has been recast at that point by this guy. I'm gonna have to look up his damn name for a moment. Give me a second. I don't have to look too far, luckily. Just a second. There's the name. Don Cheadle, who is a military liaison of Tony's, and he used to be a ranked member of the military, of the US military, but now he has an exoskeleton suit and that is similar to Tony's, but he goes by the name of War Machine. So that is this guy again. And so the whole team, the Avengers, are split over this decision. You have one side that has Tony as the leader, basically, who says that we really need the oversight. Because if we're not responsible for our own actions and all the damaged goods and there's a fancy term that the Americans use. It comes down to the consequences of your actions, and so the Avengers are split over this. You got one side that includes Tony, and they're like, we need to be put in check, while Steve is basically the lead on the other side, who thinks that he can hold his judgment in compared to that of politicians who think that the Avengers have more play if they are overseen by an organization designed for oversight. And while that is all happening, by the way, a little extra info on all of that. The reason why Tony is so gun ho on this is that he was confronted at his alma mater, MIT, by a mother who lost her child in Sokovia. Well, they were, as Tony says, kicking ass. And so he is very aware of what has happened. While Steve is more like, yeah, you're not completely wrong, Tony, but does that need to be taken for us or by us? That responsibility. So those are the two sides. It's like the flip of a coin, basically. So, and that splits up the group. And while this is happening, you have a guy. I have a little picture of this guy here. His name is Helmut Zemo, and he's played by Daniel Brühl in this movie. And he used to be from Sokovia too, and he was actually an intelligence officer there. He had a group called Scorpion Echo, but unfortunately in what happened in Sokovia with the Avengers, he lost his family, and so he's out for revenge. And so he's looking for a way to break the Avengers. And so he finds the old Hydra handler that Bucky Barnes had, and he steals a book from this handler that contained all the words to trigger Bucky Barnes' brainwashing, because at this point Bucky hasn't completely lost all his marbles yet again. He's kind of a bit loose from all of that while trying to live his life. And so Zemo also shows off his cruelty by torturing and killing this guy by hanging him upside down and let him drown by the mouth in a tub of water. And then we got to the United Nations conference in Vienna, in Europe, where the Sokovia Accords are about to be ratified. And we meet Natasha there, who talks with the Wakandan king, T'Chaka, and also his son, T'Challa, who in this movie is played by the brilliant Chadwick Boseman, who unfortunately also died years ago. R.I.P. And as the king is giving his remarks, his speech, T'Challa is looking around and he notices something about to happen. And something does happen. There's a giant explosion, a bomb, that shakes up the whole room. And one of the unfortunate people that are dead because of this bomb is King T'Chaka. And so we meet the both of them, Natasha and T'Challa, outside, where T'Challa vows that he is gonna kill whoever did this, who took his father from him, a man he loved so much, who had him trained and raised him to be a man, to be a king. And he has this way of talking that really informs who he is that he has a deep belief in his country and his people and in the beliefs of their country, that he really is like, I need to do this. this is who I am now. But Natasha, of course, reminds him that they're already being this bomber, this potential bomber, is already being searched for by the authorities, both in Europe and in America. And it is then brought to Steve's attention that they think, the authorities think that the person that did the bombing was his old friend. Was his old friend, Bucky Barnes, who is or used to be known as the Winter Soldier. And so Steve has his own kind of vow to find Bucky and make it clear that it wasn't him that did this, but that it was someone else. But because there's evidence that maybe it was him, he needs to make it clear to people that no. I say no. And so Steve and Sam travel to Europe, and he tries to bring Bucky back to the fold. And they track him to Bucharest, where they are trying to protect him from both the German authorities and T'Challa, who is following all of this with his vow, as I just said. And we get this incredible action scenes of Steve meeting Bucky, being a bit more Bucky than Winter Soldier at this point. And so we have this amazing action sequence of them getting out of the apartment and fighting with the German security forces and getting out of there, and then being pursued by T'Challa, who is, as people didn't know at that point, the Black Panther, who is the protector of Wakanda. And ultimately, all these three superhumans, these super soldiers, because T'Challa also has like a superpower set, because, and you notice when you watch the next movie that in this timeline, that being the Black Panther movie, that he also has superpowers, basically, mostly being endurance, fighting, and strength. And so all of them are apprehended by the security forces, ultimately, who are being led at this point by one of their own. This guy, by Rhodes himself, by War Machine, who is part of the security forces at this point. And that leads us to Bucky's, not just Bucky's apprehension, but Steve's and everyone else of the current Avengers, and they get into like a security place. The name or the place escapes me, but like a high, a place where people can hold other people. It's not completely clear what kind of place this is. In any case, at this point, the security forces have contacted someone to help them interview Bucky Barnes about everything. But the person that shows up is actually Baron Zemo, who is impersonating this psychiatrist. And he uses the moment to use those words from that book he found from Barnes' own old handler to reactivate the brainwashing. And that sends Bucky back on a rampage through the building, and they have to fight themselves again. You have the top half of this group again just fighting each other, along with her too, along with Emily Camp's Agent 13 and Tony too. Sorry, that wasn't Emily Van Camp. This is Emily Van Camp. This is Bucky. And so they're fighting amongst each other, and there's a brief moment where Natasha fights the Winter Soldier for a moment, and she says like, "Don't you recognize me?" Because she used to have uh, fights with him in the past on past missions in other places too. She has this talk about a previous moments from the previous movie, from the Winter Soldier movie itself, where she tells Steve that she was trying to get somebody out of a country, but that person got killed by the Winter Soldier, and so she has a scar because of the Winter Soldier. So that's why she says all of that. And so that leads everyone to regain what has happened. That didn't make a lot of sense there. But as all of that is happening, Zemo uses this to escape, and he does. Although he's being pursued by Sam Wilson in that moment, in the movie too. And so, until Steve gets back to Bucky, and you see this like amazing moments for Steve where Bucky is trying to fly away in a helicopter, but Steve is trying to hold it back with his arms, and he just like has this like pure moment of strength where he's trying to hold it back with his supernatural strength. And so that leads us to the two of them back in another river, in another aerial vehicle, and they get each other. We find them back with Bucky's arm stuck in something in some place, and that's where Bucky tells them that Zemo is the bomber of the UN building, and what exactly it is that he wanted from Bucky, which was the location of that base that he was coming from so many years ago when he was trying to regain the super serum that had been taken from there. And so he also tells them that actually he wasn't the only Winter Soldier. And so at this point, the three of them decide to go after that, of course, and they go rogue, practically, and they recruit a couple of their fellow Avengers that are in different places, like Wanda Maximoff. I'll show her a picture again. This one right here. But then also Clint Barton, the guy here in the middle, played by Jeremy Renner. And of course also Scott Lang, this guy right here, played by I'm blanking on the name. Paul Rudd, the comic actor, who also had his own previous movie before this in Ant-Man, as he becomes the new Ant-Man, and in this movie he is recruited by them to their cause. And while that is happening, we have our other team that is being assembled by Tony, who has gotten, by the way, another person's permission, this guy here, Ross, the Secretary of State, to get a team of his own. And Tony's team is a combination of himself and then Natasha right here in this corner right here. But then also now not yet a king but a prince, T'Challa, and then War Machine, this guy right here, and then also Vision, our guy the android right here with the Infinity Stone in his head. And then also somebody we haven't seen at this point yet in the MCU, but for the very first time, Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker. And we have a scene where Tony recruits him and he meets his Aunt May, and basically convinces Peter to come and help him deal with something. And so the team meets the other team in Leipzig. Which is a part of Germany. And in the airport there, the Leipzig Halle airport. And there is where they fight. So the two teams of the Avengers fight each other. You get like a 6-on-6 team. And you get some very funny moments. You have Ant-Man using his ability to go giant while he has to fend off Spider-Man, for instance. You have an iconic shot from the comic books themselves where Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, is shooting Ant-Man up to an enlarged Ant-Man. And this is like an iconic moment from the comic books themselves, because it's a take for take moment where Scott Lang is sitting on the arrow. You're gonna have like the, and he gets into the giant man, I will say, which is the enlarged version of Ant-Man. And you have all these fun little moments between the two teams where they're fighting each other. You have like a fairly friendly but holding back punches fight between Hawkeye and Black Widow. You have what else? Everyone trying to get, there's funny moments between Sam and Bucky and then Spider-Man, where Spider-Man really shows just how inexperienced he is, despite having his own experience as a sort of vigilante in New York City. And there's the funny moment where Sam says to him, like, in fights, there's usually not this much talking. And that Spider-Man reveals that he's actually here just to try and get Tony Stark to be impressed by all of his doing. Yeah. So there's all these fun little fights and big fights. But ultimately, Steve and Bucky get to escape as Natasha lets them, because she realizes that we really can't hold back these two. They need to go do what they need to go do. But in the process of this, Rhodes, played by Don Cheadle, again this guy in the pic, is unfortunately shut down as they're trying to get Bucky and Steve, who are sitting in a Quinjet, which is like a special kind of aerial vehicle that has been made by S.H.I.E.L.D. And so there's this chase through the air to get them in that special plane. And unfortunately, Vision hits Rhodey. And that leads Rhodey to fall to the ground. And of course, Tony is extremely upset about this. And they get him to a hospital as fast as possible. But unfortunately, the the wound has Rhodey so badly damaged that he is now partially paralyzed from the waist down. But then the rest of the team on Steve Rogers' side is captured and they are detained at the prison called the Raft, while Natasha goes into exile because she's done with all this mess. And I have to mention, by the way, too, that leads into the next movie in this timeline that isn't really part of the Captain America franchise, and that is the Black Widow movie, where Scarlett Johansson meets her old family from her Red Room days. And but I have to say this, of course, because it also leads into the other movie that has now just come out, and that is the Thunderbolts, where you meet her, where you meet Natasha's adoptive father and sister and her mother, who were all at one point agents for the Red Room, trying to take over the world, I guess. And that leads into her own origin story. And so that I needed to say because it's part of the timeline, of course, and it leads into the Thunderbolts, where everything comes together. And I am gonna do at one point also an episode about that movie too. So let's continue. So a lot of the team is captured and detained at the Raft. Natasha goes into exile. But then Tony comes to visit the Raft and is talking to the group, trying to find out if they know something more. And of course, he does get that information. And he also gets information from the news and from his artificial intelligence that he has in his suit that helps him maintain it too, from Friday, that actually Bucky did not bomb the UN, that he was framed by Baron Zemo. And we get this it sort of is like an exposition dump. Personally, for my money, the Zemo scenes in this movie are the least bits, because we do get to show who Zemo really is and what he wants. He wants the Avengers to go. He wants them to have a taste of his revenge, basically. He wants them to know what it's like to have power without having any natural or fighting or prowess that they can have. That he just has the ability to just tear them apart, basically. So he uses that to his advantage. And that was my phone. Anyway. And so Tony learns all of this and he decides to go after Sam and... Not Sam. He decides to go after Steve and Bucky, as he gets Sam to give him the information, specifically the destination of where they were going to with the Quinjet. And so Tony goes there to the Hydra facility in Siberia, and he doesn't tell Secretary Ross about it. And we have this fun moment between the three of them where Tony uses pop culture mentions to address Bucky. He calls him the Manchurian Candidate, which kind of fits. But the three of them don't even know that they are actually all followed by somebody else with every intention of getting revenge on Zemo, and that is T'Challa for killing T'Chaka, his father. But then they find Zemo, and he explains everything. Or rather, he has something explain everything. And so he plays this little tape of what we saw in the beginning of this movie, the prologue, where Bucky Barnes got the serum back, and it was from the people that Tony happened to be very close to. It was his parents. They had the serum that they were going to use, but you see this transformational moment for Tony where he shows that he is capable of emotion. He's capable of very deep, very nasty, angry emotion. And so he is so incredibly mad and angry that this was kept from him for so long. And he asks Steve if he knew this. And Steve can't help but give him the truth and tell him, yeah, he did know. But he wasn't going to tell him. And so Bucky, Steve, and then Tony have this amazing fight that gets them all throughout this Hydra base in Siberia. And we have this iconic shot. I have it up on my Instagram as a moment that I love from this movie, where Steve is rushing towards Tony as he is using his repulsor weaponry from his armor. And you have this moment where they... No, wait, I think I get it the other way. So either one of them is rushing towards the other, and I believe it's Steve holding back with the sheet. I believe it's Steve holding back with his vibranium shield, and he has this moment where the repulsor technology that Tony is using that reflects off of the shield. And this is a specific moment from the comics, apparently. And it's a perfect recreation of it. But that turns on its head as Bucky tees in, but only to get his metallic arm blown off by the repulsor technology that Tony is using. And then to take Tony out, Steve takes the Iron Man armor out by plunging the shield into the arc reactor, and he pulls away from Tony, and that leaves their fight at an end. But Tony is just so pissed still that he says that shield isn't yours, Steve. It was my father's. He made it. It is mine. And so Steve and Bucky leave, and Steve leaves the shield behind because of it. And as this is all happening, Baron Zemo gets to the top of the Siberian base, and he's so satisfied at tearing the Avengers apart that he is now completely satisfied. And because he has longed for so long to be with his family again, he attempts to commit suicide. But he is stopped by T'Challa, who stops him from killing himself, and he takes him to the authorities. And in the last moments of this movie, we see that Tony has now given Rhodey a similar kind of exoskeleton suit that he's been using, so that Rhodey can now walk with leg braces. And we see at the same time also Steve, in a contrast to each other, breaking the Avengers out of the raft. And then we get to the famous after credits scenes that Marvel does, that Steve is taking Bucky to I'm gonna rephrase. In a mid-credits scene, we see that Steve is taking Bucky to Wakanda, where Bucky has gotten asylum, by the way, and Bucky is now decided that he needs to return to cryogenic sleep until there is a legit cure for his brainwashing, in the hope that he no longer gets tempted by those words that were used before. And then there's another post-credit scene where we see that Peter Parker has found the new suit that he had already gotten from Tony to fight the other group. But he really gets to explore like what it is to have like a fully technological, innovative suit that has been made by Tony Stark. And that's where the movie ends. So that's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, but it is done in such an incredible cinematic way. I talked about the iconic shots of Hawkeye firing off Scott Lang in tiny form of an arrow towards Giant Man, and also the iconic moment from, I believe it was Steve rushing towards Tony, or it was the other way around. I forget it. With moments, but it's such an iconic shot from the comics that has gone into this movie that is just amazing, and you see just this good contrast and combination of all the heroes, and just how well that the Russo brothers who direct this movie have done it, really showing off how to master getting so many people together for a purpose. And that leaves us with the dissolution of the Avengers at the end of this movie. And since then, until a whole while later, probably in an episode I will do about the future Avenger movie from, and I'm talking about Infinity War and Endgame, of course. And yeah, this is just an amazing movie with so many damn characters that are done so well that it is still at the very height of my favorite MCU movies. And so that leaves me with the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching and listening. I will see you in the next video. You can also like and subscribe. You can comment too. Also share this with as many people as you know. This way I get a bit of traction online, and I want to thank you for all of that. And I'll see you in the next video. See ya.